Yes.
All good? Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me the chance to present Confluence today. We had a great session yesterday. And the way I would present is to look at the business strategy, to cover what we are trying to achieve as part of the business strategy. And then I will tie back to platform. So we will go into the breadth of Confluence, and then I would deep dive into certain areas and tie back to what we covered yesterday. So I do have slides, and I hope I can share John's positivity. And with that, let's get started. So what is the opportunity for Confluence? We want to become the indispensable knowledge and collaboration layer for every team in an organization. The four areas which we want to focus on is customer love, enterprise features, extensibility, smarts, and insights. I will be talking about these four areas in the subsequent slides. So these are the four pillars for our success of Confluence. Why is this opportunity exciting? So we need to reduce the barrier for entry for customers moving to cloud. With the Care Bear announcement and all, we have seen apprehensions, right? People have these feelings of like, the cloud is not as performant, is not as reliable. And these are the kind of challenges which make this opportunity really exciting. The other area which we need to focus on is competing with Notion. We have seen churn rates go up with, as Notion is becoming a stronger threat to Confluence. And there is another area of customers which we want to attract with FedRAMP and the regulated industries. We also know that intelligence and automation are the keys to success. So this is what makes this opportunity really exciting. How will we get there? So we are looking at certain short-term optimizations in FY22. There is plans of some transitionary architectures, which is our midterm solutions. And then, of course, we have decomposition, a long-term vision. We also will be leveraging platform extensively. And I should have put this in bold because I will show you the amount of dependencies which we have with platform. So we will be relying heavily on platform for the success. This is some of our personal goals: to be agile, roll out features faster, and get feedback. And if you want to be agile, you need to have safeguards in place for the developer confidence. As the developers are making these changes, we need to have the right set of safeguards in place so that the developer is confident of making these changes. How are we going to be different for FY22? One thing which I have been emphasizing a lot is the cloud first mentality. See, Jira and Confluence were not architected for the cloud. And that is the reason there are some of these legacy APIs. There are unbounded data sets which we have to deal with. And these are a lot of our causes for outages. So as we are rolling out new features, new APIs, we want to talk about how would we work in a multi-tenant environment in the cloud. So cultivating this mindset is extremely important. And we've seen that as we are rolling out new features, as we are focusing on ecosystem, we are trying to inculcate this within the team. We want to be nimble. If you have to compete with the likes of Notion, you really need to be nimble and you need to go and deliver features fast. And the next thing which we want to focus on is performance. We have already seen the emphasis on performance is reliability. And this is an area which we really heavily want to invest in. So to do this, right, like we are putting in a lot of strategies in place. We are thinking about having load testing before any new features get rolled out to understand the impact on scale. We are also thinking of having performance testing being done as part of nightly CI/CD pipelines. So you can identify bottlenecks and degradations faster. So there are numerous such projects which are in the way to make us different from where we were before. I did not mention reliability because, reliability is the known foundation. We have already achieved where we are and we have to keep that momentum going. So even though it is not mentioned over here, it is implicit. Now, what does success look like for FY22? So 40K scale. I think the overall enterprise goal is 35K, but I think we can definitely push the boundaries with 40K. We do have some wiggle room and we are definitely aiming for that. One area which we really need to focus on is migrations. Migration story has not been that great, and with so many customers moving from server to cloud, I think we will need to have a lot more investment and focus on migrations. I have put some KPIs in the brackets, and this is how we would measure our success. The other is experiences powering by insights and data. And one of our key metrics, which we would be measuring by, is the web engagement growing up to 66%. Mobile is 10% of web, but they are trying to quantify those numbers for mobile also. Another area which I want to improve on is faster developer velocity. So we are trying to measure the current cycle times for changes to reach production and how we could make those faster. And of course, the success for FY22 would be to have incremental progress for the regulated industries with all the work which we are doing with data classification, BYOK, and all those initiatives. And I've put performance because that is another area which we will be measuring. Right now, I think we are aiming for the TTI less than 4 seconds. We are discussing with the PMs to have measurable goals around performance. So with that, let me talk about the 4 pillars of Confluence and how does platform play a fundamental role in the delivery of this. So the first one is enterprise confidence. I have just taken the top few features. This is not an exhaustive list of the features which we plan to deliver in FY22, but I've taken a few key ones. And I have also emphasized platform over here. So when I'm talking about platform, I'm including TWP, event, data, cloud infrastructure. And if I have omitted any services, it is not intentional. I was trying to show the relevance of the most important services for FY22, which we'll rely on. But overall, I'm looking at these pillars cannot be successful without the foundation of platform. So as we look at enterprise confidence, we are looking at the 40K user support, performance, audit logs, the seamless migration. Some of these areas I will talk in the subsequent slides in a little more details, but some I might just go over it right now. Customer love is the area where we want to compete with Notion. And this means making our experiences more modern, whether it means adding better notifications, adding reactions. There is a whole project of visual vision, which is understanding the customer journeys and making them very seamless for new users of Confluence. There is fearless creation, which means people are normally scared to publish documents which they are not completely confident about, and how do you handle those? And then mobile. So mobile is always treated like a secondary citizen. Some of our APIs have not been designed with mobile in mind. And this is something which I found out. So as new features are coming out, we want to make sure that mobile is accounted for, and web, mobile, and ecosystem use similar APIs so that you don't do something specifically just for mobile. The third pillar which we want to focus on is extensibility. So we have projects which are already in way of better integrations with JSM. JSW is next on the horizon. And then we are also talking with PMs for integrations with Trello, Slack, and other external products too. There are premium features like team calendars, which are rolled out with the goal of increasing our PEU. And then automation for Confluence. We will be seeing heavy emphasis on automation for Confluence, as well as automation with integrations of other products with Confluence. And then lastly, I wanted to focus on APIs. So third party first, as well as just understanding our ecosystem and giving more APIs for the external apps and vendors to build on top of us is an area which we want to focus on. The last but not the least pillar is the smarts and insights. So we have numerous projects in way. One is improving the search relevance. We've already started working on an experimental search cluster. And John had mentioned about that yesterday. We do have S3 buckets where we are bootstrapping the data. And the reason we do that is we don't want to overload the monolith every time we want to bootstrap an experimental cluster. So we have this process in the way where we could bootstrap it once, put it in the S3 buckets, and then you can generate these experimental clusters and do some experiments for search relevancy. Whenever we do these kinds of experiments, We also evaluate the cost. So I'm asking the team to do a cost analysis. So when we do these smaller projects, we have the cost analysis also, so that it's not a sticker shock afterwards with these kinds of projects. The other areas are analytics and insights. You may have seen the blog yesterday. We started rolling out surface insights, but there is more coming in the way. We use Druid for some of these analytics. Template recommendations is another area which we want to focus on, give developers better recommendations, and that would be powered by feature stores. We are also going to be exploring to integrate with Tekton in future. And the last one I had is relevant and new feeds. You may have seen some changes coming up with the new activity feeds. So these are the areas which are getting powered by our smarts and insights. So now that we talked about the 4 pillars, I did have the dependencies on platform. We are looking at all the different platform components as well as the cloud infrastructure. So whether it is observability or the developer experience teams, we are definitely relying on them to make these pillars successful. So now let's talk about a few features in depth. One of them is the 40K scale. So the way we are going to reach 40K scale is by having local optimizations, caching, and these are our tactical approaches. Borealis is something we are heavily relying on. So we need Borealis. We are also planning not only for our large customers, but we want to roll out Borealis to our regular fleet of customers. Thanks to Rick for sponsoring the initial project. We've got 3 contractors on board, and by next quarters, we are starting to put our own team members to do this and take it to the next level. Decomposition is underway, and we've been working with the perms team for permissions decomposition, TWP team for content. And in future, because if perms and content moves out, we might have to reevaluate page tree and other projects. In terms of dependencies, we are looking at the data team for Aurora migrations. And one of the areas we have raised with the data team is the support for Kafka. So this is underway because we are using Avon cluster for Kafka, and HIPAA and FedRAMP concerns have come because Avon employees can access our cluster. So I have raised this as a ticket, and we are following up with the data team. If they could help us by next year, we want to move away from Avon. So we don't want to sign that contract. And of course, in terms of dependencies for decomposition, we do rely on TWP as well as the perm service. I did not mention UPP, but UPP would be an area we would love to pursue in future whenever it would be available. Migrations is another area which I think we should definitely focus on. Yesterday, we did not get a chance to talk about our migration strategies, but I would request Rick to follow this up, and in future, maybe we should get the migration platform team to come and present their vision. And I would love to share what Confluence is doing in terms of how we are trying to revamp our export imports, our backup restore, and our PDF exports. We are doing a bunch of re-architecture changes because whatever has worked in the past is not going to work in the current scenarios, and we can definitely optimize it. So in terms of support for regulated industries, the projects which we would be focusing on would be the BYOK data classification. And we would be relying on platform teams. So especially for BYOK, for the edge encryption, data platform for the customer key, the database encryption. And we would have to also figure out how would the search index encryption work. So these are like the top level dependencies. I'm sure there will be much more as we start going deeper into these projects. So the next area which I wanted to talk about was Notion competitiveness. So we want to make our experiences modern, and we would be relying on notifications platform for notifications, reaction service. We want to introduce reactions in Confluence, and we want to make our data dynamic and real time. So one of the areas which we've invested in Confluence is GraphQL subscriptions, but we are also talking with the platform team, and we will be ahead in the GraphQL subscriptions because we've already rolled it out to Hello and take it to production in the next 2 quarters. But we've told the platform team that we can collaborate with them. And in future, we will move our features to the Atlassian GraphQL gateway. So we are already in the works of platform to leverage that whenever they are ready. I do have on the left mobile optimizations and visual visions. but I'm not going to cover in depth about that. Maybe we could take it in questions later. But overall, I just wanted to focus on these are the platform dependencies which would really help us achieve competitiveness with Notion. In terms of extensibility, we want to give the facility to create and edit content across all Atlassian products. And it has to be powered by Confluence. We want to use automation. We want to leverage the ecosystem. So one of the dependencies which I think will help us succeed over here is the FI object and graph store. I've already been talking with Igor, and this is our integration for JSW. We would really hope to leverage the FI graph store. We could also evaluate if AGG is an option, if it is ready for us to start looking at these integrations. We are already talking with TWP teams for the new collab service because we want to show these editors in the cross products. And then in future, we will be integrating with other TWP services like mentions, smart links, share components. So what we are trying to do is standardize the permissions across all these so that there is a standard contract which all the TWP teams and products can understand, and it is powered by the perm service. As part of these integrations, automations, we will heavily rely on Forge. And so I thought it would be good to mention Forge as a dependency because the success of some of our features, which we ourselves are building and dogfooding, also depends on Forge. Okay. So takeaways for better collaboration. This is how I wanted to sum up. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Okay, can you see the slide? Yeah. So this is how I wanted to summarize yesterday's discussion and tie it together with our architecture strategy. So one of the things which we want to do is democratize the access to data. I know John has brought this up, and I've already been talking with the engineering managers. We will be integrating with Data Lake, and we want to benefit from the ecosystem around it. So this is something which I have already been talking with them. Another area is the Tecton AI. So we are looking at doing POCs with the platform team and figuring out how we could leverage their data store and work with Tecton AI. So this is something we will be planning for H1. The other area which I thought was very interesting was when David Mankin talked about event platform and bootstrapping data. I think that might be really helpful. So if depending on when the project is ready, I would love to explore that for Confluence. TDP, as Rick mentioned, was a hot topic. I would really appreciate if whenever TDP is ready for piloting with newer products for services, I would love to volunteer and see how we could work with TDP, because there is a lot of repetition which we do across our services, right? We use DynamoDB for our decompose services. Every service has to worry about data residency. We are working with Rene to figure out the DR strategies, eventing. So I think there is a lot of potential if we could leverage TDP. Front-end instrumentation is highly critical, especially with all the performance, all the focus we are putting on performance. I think we need some standardized front-end instrumentation. In terms of reliability, also, we had done great instrumentation, and that helped us see the benefits which we saw in Confluence. And then standardizing for telemetry and observability. So I think Observability is a step in the right direction. And I think these would really help us make great progress. So that's all I had, and I can open up for questions.
We only have 2 minutes, so if anyone asks a question, be mindful of that.
Yeah, if there's any clarifying questions, we can answer them now. Otherwise, we'll have the block at the end for the Q&A via Slido. Any clarifying questions?
I just had one clarifying question on the previous slide. Democratize access to data. Is that for building smarts, product smarts, or what is that?
Okay. Yeah, so yeah, that is for smarts. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, and I did capture the action item or ask for a deep dive into the migration platform team strategy. I see that there was a link to their vision in the slide, but we'll in the channel, sorry, but we'll make sure to capture that as a follow-up. All right, so on to Jira platform, 20 minutes.
Hey, G'day. So I'm Robbie. I wanted, and with me also is Andre, who'll be presenting half of this presentation. So what is Jira Platform? I just wanted to stress there's actually two separate orgs that make up Jira Platform. There's Jira Scale and Performance, where my focus is, and there's Jira Shared Experiences, where Andre's focus is. So there's a, you'll hear a bit from both of us. I know we've got slightly different focuses, but we're both pushing Jira in the same direction. So, page. Why is my, sorry, I'm having a little bit of keynote trouble. There we go. So what is Jira? What's our North Star? We want to be the place where work flows. We want to provide a platform to build the products working with issues, which are our key abstraction and represent units of work. So this platform provides a bunch of associated abstractions such as projects, fields, permissions, workflows, and all the capabilities you need to work with these things. So the important thing to think about here is that we're in the business of building a platform for products. So even though we're kind of in the product section, we're a bit straddling the divide between platform and product. We're a product on one side and a platform on the other side. We are in the process of reconstructing Jira for this platform vision. Our goal for Jira's platform is to provide a secure, reliable, operationally mature, scalable, performant platform so we can build our products and so we can build the features that we need to build the products that our customers want. So the important thing here is that we're not yet at this point, and we don't think we can get there on Jira's current architecture. So we're in the middle of a kind of re-architecture process of moving Jira from where it was to where it needs to be to meet this future. We want to delegate genuine platform concerns to platform components so that we can then allow integration with the broader ecosystem, both within Atlassian, so we can meet our enterprise requirements around residency and stuff like that, but also with third-party integrations, so Forge and things like that. So again, we're building a platform on a platform for the products to build on top of. Why are we doing this, right? So what's the purpose behind this effort? What are we trying to achieve? There's really three main things that we're trying to get out of this. The first kind of comes under the bucket of scale, performance, and reliability benefits. One of the reasons we decompose is to improve our scaling, not just computational scaling, but organizational scaling. We need to decouple teams to build better experiences. And the goal here is that some of these back-end improvements will also unlock front-end improvements for performance and scale. Modernization of our stacks will improve our productivity and satisfaction. So we currently have large operational burdens, and we want to reduce these with improved observability, better incident management, and lower service KPLO. So we want to use Atlassian platform features where possible to simplify and reduce the cost of adoption of platform requirements such as BYOK, data residency, and that suite of features. Finally, the last thing is that by platformizing Jira, we want to make it easier for people to reuse and compose experiences so that they can speed delivery of their features. So this allows Jira to become a better platform for both for existing and for new products, and also we can lean into third-party first via this mechanism. So what's this reconstruction process all about? Today, Jira is mostly a monolith, right? So issue service has been extracted and we're approaching 100% consistency for reads on that service, but most other Jira functionality resides in the monolith, and even issue service is still reliant on the monolith for lots of things, such as permissions, for example. So while our decomposition journey has started, it's a very long road. So our goal at the moment is to get rid of this monolith and replace it with a bunch of cooperating microservices. That's not kind of a rocket science vision, but what I wanted to stress is that the broad design for this is emerging via updates to the Jira platform painted picture. We have a group of architects crossing JSP and JSE. That group refers to itself as JARPA, which is the Jira Architecture Roadmap and Picture Agency. We haven't finished the exact design. It's an evolution of the design that Matt Quayle and Andrei Velayev and myself put together going on nearly 2 years ago now. Some parts of it are relatively well formed, some parts of it are still pretty nascent. And so we're kind of building out that picture and figuring out what that thing needs to look like. So you can see what I've sketched out here are some examples of the kind of stuff that we're working on. Some of these are pretty well underway, such as the issue service. Some of them are much more embryonic, like notifications would be a good example of that. The other thing to mention about this is I've put fairly coarse assemblies on this page because we haven't completely finished we haven't, not even completely finished. We're still on the journey to figuring out what all of this means. So for example, projects and fields will likely be a constellation of services dealing with project configuration, depending on how that domain model pans out. And similarly, search JQL, which I'll touch on later, is also going to be a group of services. So the problem with this decomposition vision in terms of where we've got to is that the heart of it all is still the monolith database. Our decomposition journey is not really about service decomposition. It's really about data decomposition. How do we take that data that is sitting in the monolith and shift the issue data out to issue service, shift the config data out to projects and fields, the permissions data to permissions, feed the data that is necessary for search to do its job into search, and so on. So the hard part of this picture is how do we do that data deconstruction. It's not just a data motion problem, it's actually a data deconstruction problem. The schema of the database of Jira's per tenant databases are complicated. They're potentially explicitly tenant dependent, as in there's no systemic guarantees that the schema is the same from tenant to tenant. And there are definitely implicit tenant dependencies, as in the things like whether or not columns are potentially foreign keys into other undeclared foreign keys into other columns can vary from tenant to tenant. So we have a big problem here of how we actually pull apart that data. That's not a simple part of the process. So that's kind of the mess where we want to get to and where we are right now. So what are we doing in the short term? So I'm going to dive into a section talking about what Jira Scale and Performance is planning for FY22 in the short term. And then I'll hand over to Andre to talk about what JSE is planning and to wrap up with a bit about what we see as the dependencies. So where is Jira Scale and Performance at? The first big chunk of work that we're looking to fund in FY22 is to build out some of those event streams for data extraction. Some of our previous efforts to decompose the monolith have founded a bit on availability of data. Issue extraction has succeeded because they really got a good pattern for data extraction and executed it well. So what we need to do is what we want to do is follow that path and do the same thing to build out these event streams to free up the people building the downstream services from the need to solve two problems simultaneously. The pattern they're using is not rocket science. It's the outbox pattern, as was discussed yesterday, but we know that this can be done along with strangling rights within the monolith to get control of where data is being written and to move to a point where issue services shown us they can get 100% reliability, close to 100% reliability already on reads, and they should be at 100% consistency by the end of this quarter. So yeah, the next big project that we are working on is permissions. So we need to do permissions extraction. This is critical for Jira because it unblocks other services. So as a kind of maybe surface example, issue service can't serve issues without permissions. So as long as permissions can only be determined by the monolith, any request to Jira data has to go through the monolith, which obviously we don't want. Permissions data is needed for search. Whether or not you can see data affects whether or not you can search it. And in particular, the efficiency of paging on large calls is heavily affected by what you can see, particularly on large instances where permissions are used to segment the projects into a number of pieces, a number of areas, sorry. And so you really can't search without having accurate permissions data. It's not enough just to post filter with permissions. There are a bunch of other benefits of building out the event streams permissions, some of which are already being realized, such as improving the scalability of CPUS. So permissions will form a large chunk of work. This is both the current effort to provide event streams to CPUS, but also an extraction effort so that we can start to untangle that data in the monolith. The next, poor grammar on my slide. What does search JQL extraction mean? So the next big chunk that we're looking to undertake in FY22 is search and JQL. We have been working on search extraction for a while, and it's been difficult to make progress on it on the Jinx project. This is partly because of the event streams problem. That team was both building multiple event streams for the search data they needed, as well as the search head that accessed that data. So by freeing up that team to focus on the search head, the cold search problem, they should be able to make more progress, and we can have independent teams specializing on event streams. The other problem is that Jira uses JQL for many, many different things. And it's not, Jira uses JQL for many, many different things. And building one system to meet all those needs simultaneously is quite challenging. So another part of this vision is that we're looking to to broaden Search JQL out from just pump JQL into Elasticsearch and get some answers, but also things like JQL matches and event-based JQL subscriptions to take use cases which are better suited to those approaches and move them off cold search to give cold search the implementation freedom it needs to work properly. Search is obviously a consumer of event streams. We can't perform distributed joins. So any data which is distributed across systems needs to be denormalized into a common store for search. And finally, search is an unblocking effort. We can't remove issue data from the monolith as long as search is reliant on that issue. As long as search is localized in the monolith, it's reliant on issue data being in the monolith. And so search extraction is also about removing that blockage to data decomposition. The other 80%, so that's kind of 80% of what JSP is doing in FY22. The other 80% is all the stuff we need to do to support the 35K scale, which is our short-term goal on our roadmap. That includes projects like read replicas, classic boards and backlogs, performance and scale, and there's another list of projects here. I've kind of skimmed over them because they're not as relevant to this long-term vision, but there is a bunch of stuff going on there that we hope will give us the runway we need to make progress on the decomposition projects and get towards our end goal. So hopefully Andre is there now and can take over. Perfect.
Yeah. So thanks, Robbie. So JSE is a group of 3 orgs, you can say, that together own the set of experiences, such as issue search and view and project configuration, and other domains that are shared across Jira products. So we don't own Jira Software boards or JSD queues, but we do own all of these cross-cutting experiences. We have developed a 3-year strategy that includes 3 kind of broad investment areas. The first investment area is to unblock server to cloud migration and enterprise growth, which is ongoing from FY21 and aligns to like the #1 company priority. This area includes several streams of work. So the first is scaling work for 35K in FY22 and probably greater scale beyond that by reducing load on RDS mostly, as Robbie has laid out. This is supported by key extraction projects in JSE such as issue extraction and followed by other key extraction projects and accelerating extraction dependencies. So permissions and search, as Robbie has laid out, are key dependencies that we need to be able to extract other pieces from the monolith. These projects would strategically depend on advanced data management initiatives and support from platform dependencies such as permissions. We also expect continued investment in front-end performance and reducing TTI beyond our current rail goals of 4 seconds. So we might look going forward at more ambitious goals, such as going down to 1 second. This is still under discussion. And this is supported by the front-end platform initiatives that Ian spoke about yesterday. Finally, a large area of focus is support for enterprise and regulated industries. This includes both features being built in our key experiences and support for, as we see from the regulated industries group. At the moment, the key focus areas here include support for BYOK encryption and data classification for APIs. The approach to BYOK is currently being phased, with the first phase focusing on offering BYOK encryption for data at rest and application level encryption in a way that preserves product functionality and can be layered later on with further improvements. Advanced data management capabilities are key dependencies here, as well as support from cloud provisioning, micros data, crypto, and TWP services such as content and media. The next stream of work is Unify, which is a project to converge our data models and key experiences and solve this duality that exists with the current coexistence of Next-Gen and Classic within Jira, which is a large, probably understatement, massive pain point for customers. The focus area is on selecting existing experiences to converge on and applying that across all of Jira, along with making key improvements to this user experience. This is a very large program of work, including 10 to 15 streams of engineering work across multiple years, but is largely work that happens within Jira without major platform dependencies identified so far. Finally, the last major investment area focuses on platformizing Jira to support Jira products entering new markets. We have seen that the Jira platform is not easy to adopt today and need to start offering experiences that can be adopted and extended easily by both new and existing products, as well as potentially third parties. A large component of this work includes replacing key experiences with modern React components, and then focusing on extensibility and reusability of these experiences. GraphQL plays a key role here, and having a unified GraphQL API and AGG backing these experiences becomes strategic, supported by a scalable shared GraphQL client. We'll also be changing how components are built to modularize these experiences and support reusability and extensibility. Much of this is supported by front-end platform initiatives, including front-end health, infrastructure, and methodologies covered by Ian yesterday. Finally, there are several strategic new feature initiatives, such as teams in Jira and the concept of a template workspace, which are still under development. So we can talk a little bit about some of our key dependencies, and we've put some of them on this slide. These are some of the key dependencies that we will need to deliver the initiatives that we just spoke about. And to be clear, there is much that is left out of the slide, since Jira consumes most, if not all, of Atlassian's platform. In cases like the events platform and FI, there is much that we can and do already use. So this focuses on additional capabilities we are interested in. We also see then that new initiatives from Data Platform and Bree being strategic to these new efforts going forward. So if we go quickly through it, from the events platform, we're very interested. We do use Protobuf heavily internally. It is what the issue event stream is based on. So that becomes key for us being able to use the events platform as well as scalability, support for large messages, supporting replication platforms, and access control. I mean, we can dig into any of those if it's of particular interest. I would probably just mention that the ability to scale to large traffic volumes in short amount of time is one of the main reasons that we probably don't use StreamUp for some key use cases today. On the FI API and manifold side, we're really interested in being the adoptability side of the story, which is well supported by the things that the team spoke about yesterday, and supporting this idea of distributed governance, observability at scale, and GraphQL subscriptions. We currently have a service called Jerk that delivers is sort of a bridge from StreamHub to front end, and we'd like to replace that in its entirety by GraphQL subscriptions. On the data platform side, we have large dependencies to support BYOK, including database encryption, probably Elasticsearch sharding and encryption, support for ALE, as well as teamwork platform and media, which is more on the actual customer value side. We also see that we would like to sort of see end-to-end patterns to support these data requirements that we see often coming in from platforms such as data residency or BYOK. And TDS and FI clearly plays a large role here. We would basically want to, as we extract these services, as far as possible, adopt these platforms. But it's possible that things like sidecars and so on could also be useful for, like, managing common patterns across Memcache, Dynamo, and Elasticsearch, for example. We also see that there's a need for real-time in-product aggregation. So wherever we do our dashboarding, our reporting, in-product reports, in-product insights with in-product experiences, we can't actually use the RDS database for that today because it simply adds too much load onto the RDS database. We also can't use Plato in its current state with a data lake because the latency is too high for in-product experiences. So Druid probably plays a key role here, but basically we need some kind of a layer for these real-time in-product aggregations. And finally, Bree is critical for us. This is about solving site import-export. Site import-export is an anchor for decomposition and extraction. We need everything currently to go back into the monolith to be able to support site import-export, even if we solve everything else. So Bree becomes a critical dependency there.
What is Bree?
Backup, restore, import, export.
We're going to talk about that in the enterprise section.
So yeah, we can take any questions. I think we have some time left.
Any clarifying questions?
All right, thanks, guys.
There are questions on the Slido, so if you can have time to answer them in person.
Yep. Continue to submit questions and upvote on Slido. All right, next up is Jira Software, Sunny and Matt.
you see myself? There we go. Perfect. I'm using Confluence. Feel free to drop questions in here if the Slido, if we run out of time for the Slido questions. I'd love to be able to chat with you in here as well. So I'm going to split this into 3 chunks. The first chunk is to try and give you the world from our perspective, and hopefully that'll give you some empathy in terms of how we see the rest of the world and what we want to do when it comes to platform features, and also perhaps in the detail of it, why we want to solve things in a particular way and not in other ways. The second part is our own plan, and some of that is going to integrate with the other plans that like Andre and Robbie talked about, but we've also got some stuff of our own that we want to talk about there. And the third part is looking at the current challenges we have, and some of those are going to be resolved by the platform. Okay, so firstly, let's talk about the context here. We're like a very producty product in the sense that, like, in terms of the iceberg, almost everything that we do is above the level of the water. So our customers see everything. Whenever we start and pick up a task, our customers cheer for us. The features that we've promised that we haven't built yet, the customers are pretty much constantly complaining on those tickets, and we see that all the time. If something goes wrong with our experiences, customers tell us, we know. And on top of that, we've also we are a core experience for the board SLA. So in fact, if we're not reliable enough, we have to pay customers money. And that's something that's kind of our bread and butter. It's what we think about all the time. We're looking at, CSS and like style sheets and the actual presentation. We're looking at design. And that's kind of where our headspace is at. So for this, like we have a bunch of needs that we really want. And that hopefully the idea that we're very close to the customers kind of like links that in. And the first one is like turnkey solutions that don't require tweaking. A new service, for example, right now, it takes like a month to become tier 1, whereas really it should take a minute. You just like click the instant micros button and it should give you a service that's ready for tier 1. There are reasons for that, but I kind of want to discuss that in the detail. The next thing is, like, for existing services, we want to be able to make the changes quickly without having, a huge amount of burden for ourselves. So good examples here, like where teams have helped us on the platform side, is Observersaurus and Switcheroo. We're really looking forward to Switcheroo, for example, to be able to roll out in a clear and consistent way. Another thing is like a platform that's reliable, and also, like, maybe to add a bit of detail here, reliable in a very special way, right? Like reliable in the sense that we don't have to worry about it, and not reliable as in it's got the 9s. And it's also graceful degradation. So the graceful degradation part is, imagine that a certain piece, and I'm using a straw man here, like imagine identity stops working. Usernames will stop popping up, for example. What we want is some way to degrade that in a way that's graceful so that users can still get their work done. We don't want the whole app to stop working effectively. So we are constantly thinking about, like, what happens if pieces fail? How do we continue to give users something that they can use? We basically don't want to ever give them a blank screen and a sorry. And even if it's something that's ostensibly not our fault, if it's like a platform issue, we still want to be able to give them something so that they can get their work done, because it's they're very close to us, and as Bhakti was saying in her part, the customer love is an important part of our daily life as well. The other thing we want is high dev speed and iteration. When it comes to, for example, we've been talking about the AGG and also how we control the schema. We want to be able to actually try things out on that schema, just so that we can show things to customers in beta, kind of go, hey, what do you guys think about it? And maybe they'll change their minds, or they'll tell us that this is no good. We have to change our API to match. So we need to be able to iterate that way. And similarly, we need to be able to roll out fast when we do iterate that way. We don't want to have these huge like burdens in terms of having to get things approved and so on. And the final thing, which is a bit hard to probably explain, is owning our destiny. Because we're above the surface, one thing that is probably hard to understand is that, like, a lot of our work is reactive. When something goes wrong in a part of the platform, whether it's Jira platform or the broader platform, it affects us because we need to be there, at least triaging the support tickets that are coming in. So in the hypothetical identity example I gave earlier, customers are raising support tickets against Jira Software, they're not raising them against like identity directly. So Jira Software then has to kind of go, no, this is what's happening. And we also have to keep up to date in terms of when it's going to be fixed, how it's going to be fixed. That's effort. And that kind of reactive life is not the life we want. We want to be able to spend our time concentrating on bringing delight to our customers. So that's the first part. Hopefully when we sort of have these conversations in detail, that kind of shows us where we're coming from. And our main initiatives, the first one is ever ready, trying to make sure that we've got reliability and performance. A huge part of this is actually extracting from the monolith. So similar to what Andre and Robbie were talking about, we're actually extracting our own pieces out. So some of that was data residency support and server to cloud migration work, but also in terms of improving our monitoring and alerting strategy, onboarding tome and so on. We want to start moving to AGG and GraphQL subscriptions if we can. And that's part of, again, like not owning parts of the platform that we have to run. For people who aren't aware, we're running a parallel GraphQL gateway called Swag. And the reason it exists is because it predates AGG. So we want to move over from that to proper AGG and like not have to own it anymore. There are also other extraction pieces that we need to do just in terms of getting our work done. And that's in order to do that and have good performance, good reliability, and continue our transition to being a decomposed set of services. And finally, there are going to be a bunch of changes that are coming in from Jira Platform that we have to absorb on the other side. So they'll build the APIs and we have to like consume them and then show them at the front end. On the roadmap side, similarly, they're decomposing. They're trying to utilize as much of the platform as they can to do it, Sloth, Stargate, Service Proxy, etc. Then there's the mobile apps. This is an important part for us. It's been a really tricky part to get mobile and web working, in harmony, you could say. We actually really tried. We had the same team working in mobile and working on web, but it was really tricky because of the amount of like extra effort that's involved in shipping them as one cohesive experience. So for us, that's a really valuable thing. And I'm hoping that AGG will help in that regard. There are also other parts of mobile that really get affected by platform, and part of that is trying to reduce bundle sizes and using a standard notification pipeline. And I think there was an identity thing in here as well, that they couldn't really have a simple authentication mechanism. The next thing is metrics and insight. This is like a new team. I'm not really too across them, but they are basically going across Jira and trying to deliver metrics and insights. I assume they're going to be requiring a lot of the analytics pipeline and potentially a lot of the ML pipeline, depending on how they go on. But yeah, they're pretty nascent, and hopefully they can really take advantage of the platform here. And finally, there's like data lake, where we're trying to push that data out to customers so that they can use it, because that's a pretty important thing for customers to be able to grab like insights out of the work that the teams are doing. So in terms of our platform strategy and asks, we're going to over time try to increase our pool of microservices, and like the big thing that we need them to be is standard components. So the way I kind of want to talk about it is like you have a nut and a bolt. You want to make sure that the bolt fits into the nut, it goes into the hole, and also that there's like a tool that lets you tighten the nut. And when it's turnkey, it means you can literally just do it. There's no problem. You don't have, I mean, apparently back in the day, before sort of the second big wave of the Industrial Revolution, what happened was you literally had proprietary, like, what are those things called? They tighten nuts. Like those things were proprietary because their sizes were non-standard. So we want things that are standard componentized, able to be dropped in and pulled out. That's a really important part to what we want. And a huge part of that is actually not even software, it's protocols. It's the ability to have things written down in a standard way that can then be communicated between independent systems in an independent way. I can talk about that more later if people have questions about it, and I do want to write about this more broadly, but this idea of being turnkey and being quick and easy is something that really improves our lives because it allows us to keep our attention on our customers. These are the challenges, and I think some of these are going to be addressed by by the platform. But one of the meta challenges that we really have is like the Atlassian tax. And that tax is really this idea that firstly, the teams often, platform teams are not coordinated between each other. So we have two teams that are coming to us and we say to them, like, what's your cohesive vision between the two of you? And they say, we don't know, you have to figure it out. That's a tough thing to have. It would be really nice if the teams kind of came to us with one kind of cohesive vision of here's how you do it. And we go, okay, let's do it. And it's done. I think hopefully Oliver Byrne and like the dev life process will help us a lot here. So I'm really looking forward to that. The next thing is like these large initiatives, we kind of have trouble sometimes knowing what they're about and why we should care, I guess, to some degree. So we want an ability to kind of essentially be in communication as these things continue, so that the value to us is clear as well as we move on. The next thing is also that this kind of ties into the owning our own destiny part. We don't want these things to like hit us in a way where we don't expect them, like as waves washing over us. We want to own that destiny. We want to be able to pick platform pieces that we need when we need them and install them when we do. And I think that the platform needs to trust us to be able to do that properly without kind of, you know, having like dates and stuff that we have to meet. That's kind of really tough to do. This is a similar thing more broadly. It's that like we've had to say yes to a lot of things. And there are like huge amounts of Atlassian-wide initiatives, and they have touch points with Jira Software. And that's really tough for us. It makes us more reactive, and that's not really what we want. And the biggest part of that is that, you know, these initiatives, sometimes they come to us and they're quite underdone is maybe one way of putting it. It would be really nice if they came in and it was like, here's exactly how you integrate. I know exactly how long it's going to take your team. It's 2 weeks of effort because we've kind of done it with the team. Right now, the initiatives kind of come through and it's like, we've never done this before. And there's potentially a lot of work on your side and you're going to have to figure out how to do it. And that's really tough for us. In terms of developer experience right now, one of the things I think people are working on is to get tier 1 on the Cube deploys. That would be awesome because right now it deploys the 15+ minutes. We've got inefficient integration with platform pieces. So when we go to any of these things, they require PRs. That's a timing thing. It can be a problem. So we really need to make that smoother. And I think that's part of the plan as well from what I saw yesterday. The documentation process, unfortunately, you know, we kind of had a lot of flipping and flopping, whether we were using DAC or not, and whether DAC would support AGG. I actually literally had a chat with the DAC guys a long time ago, you know, to support GraphQL, and they were like, yeah, that's interesting. Maybe we'll think about that. So I'm glad that like now that we're actually getting to do that, it'll help us a lot. Also, like we don't really have a way of you know, all of the developer life stuff, which I think Oliver was talking about yesterday. We didn't really have a lot there at the moment. We don't have a lot there at the moment, and hopefully in FY22 we'll get a lot more, especially in terms of that test pyramid and the deployment story. Especially when we're doing spikes, like that's a really tough thing to do. Right now, one of our teams is doing a spike. How do we do it? It's tough, right? We don't have an answer to that question. The next thing is platform immaturity and inconsistency. These are like all of the details. The reason that a lot of people like Macintosh is because, you know, it just works is the quote. And unfortunately, right now, the details aren't sorted out. So, you know, whether we're talking about observability in the past, before Observersaurus, this was kind of largely a bunch of tools that were kind of like very disparate. And they didn't really work together super well. So we've had a bunch of iterations on how to solve our observability story, and it's taken like months of effort. And hopefully Observersaurus will make that super slick. Similarly with like feature flags and rolling out, these things kind of sound like small things, but they're actually huge in terms of the impact to a product team. So the details matter again. And hopefully again, like I'm looking to dev life to improve that flow. But again, part of that is actually going to involve dev life and other platform pieces talking to each other, so that we can have this really sing as a solution. this is basically a specific call out of the Atlassian tax, which is enterprise data management. You know, I don't want to say we don't care about it. We really care about enterprise, but on the other side, we're trying to ship features to customers, and having a whole bunch of different enterprise things kind of come at us. Again, it makes us reactive, and it means that we aren't concentrating on the customers, and that's really tough for us. We're hoping to see the TDP kind of like pay dividends here, but we also want to do this in a way which is completely under our control, so we can kind of move forward as we see it, so we can kind of like mix and match and upgrade ourselves that way. Finally, like performance and reliability is massive for us. Even a small dip in either performance or reliability, like the problem is you can kind of say you can kind of lay the root cause to another team, but that doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, our customers are using our page, and it feels really bad to say to them, I'm sorry, you're just like, the reliability is just low right now because, you know, some downstream team is having problems. What we want is the ability to kind of say to them, no, we've got the control over the product that you are asking for. We've got the tools, and we've got the switches or the levers that we can pull to give you back a page that you can use. So I think that like a lot of what we're going to ask for is going to revolve around this in the detail of it. That's me. Hopefully that's been helpful or useful. I'm going to look for the stop share button. Any questions?
We do have about 4 minutes, so if there's any clarifying questions, we can take it now. Otherwise, we'll address it in the Slido Q&A.
Just, I have just one. Sunny, on this page, you mentioned quite a bit of work. I know the page is under the title of FY22, but is it your expectations that, for example, you mentioned observability, maybe hopping onto FI and AGG, those in FY22 are your plans, or are they spilling over into subsequent years?
The thing is, we know what we need, and we need this now, or we needed this yesterday, right? So for a lot of this, it's as soon as some of this is available, we will try and be early adopters. And for some of it that, at least for the stuff that we've got time to adopt, we want to adopt it as early as possible. You know, we're just gonna have to play it by ear as for what's available and when it's available.
Yeah, I guess what I'm looking for is, you know, for sequencing and alignment purposes, as you start to learn about some of the delivery timelines and milestones, will you be ready to adopt those? And what resources do you need? So hopefully these last couple of days and subsequent meetings that will happen over the next weeks here, we have kind of a better alignment as to, if you're going to get this in Q1, do you have the team and resourcing to actually adopt or onboard, let's say, onto FI or AGG, et cetera. So, you know, we probably should get more details into that as we go forward, but I'm glad to see the brunt of the work. It's just now a matter of what you can use when.
Yeah, it's definitely tricky because we are kind of looking at this in the context of shipping features to customers. So at least from our perspective, what we've been thinking about is like, as we ship X, which is going to be the next thing we're working on, we would like to use AGG to ship X. So the timelines kind of adjust with how the features get shipped. And as you know, like as customers kind of come back about those features, we might rethink how they actually get shipped. So those timelines can kind of vary. Yeah, I know that's a fluffy answer, but yeah, that's kind of what it is, unfortunately.
Okay, moving on, Jira Service Management, Jira Service Desk, Michael and Jeremy.
Hang on, I have lost my ability to unshare. I don't know where the hell my Alt F4. Done. Thanks.
We are having a mini offsite. Let me share. So I think one of the things that we didn't really, well, we didn't do slides, and we didn't really do sort of a laundry list of dependencies. I think, you know, a lot of what we depend on is sort of transitively through Jira platform and that sort of stuff. So that stuff is important to us. I think the sort of dev experience is super important to us. How easy is it to get a service out? How easy is it to maintain it? All that kind of stuff is there are things there that we struggle with, but I think that's not really what we wanted to focus on. I think for us, from a what are we doing perspective, we'll talk about that a little bit, and then kind of where our dependencies lie in the nearer term, and kind of what some of a theme of sort of pain points that we have around platform. And really, it's not about platform or the existing solutions. It's really around how we go forward, thinking about the way that solutions are put together, and how then we deal with API routing and other stuff under the hood of that. So anyway, we'll talk about that stuff. So in the rest of FY21 and into FY22, we're focused on JSM is we want to grow into a really strong ITSM solution, and so one of the aspects of that is a CMDB, and so we're launching that in April, and then there will be some extension work on that to sort of make that a viable platform for all of our tenants at each tier that will start at premium. So and there's some alignment with Compass in there on how do we have services that are software services in Compass but make an appearance in your CMDB, so you can tie infrastructure and business services to that stuff. So that will be a big area of focus. I think expanding on what we can deliver with smart experiences and insights that from also Guido's here just arrived. So things like we were just having a sparring session yesterday around bringing insights from knowledge base and Confluence and tagging applied to issues, and sort of bringing that together and giving suggestions to agents, and that so things in the data platform direction and machine learning platform direction are super important to us, but also that brings up a bunch of issues around this sort of basic, how do we deal with residency as a solution, right? And how do we compose a solution out of Confluence and JSM and Opsgenie and CMDB and whatever the next thing is. So that's from a challenges perspective. That's that's an area I think we will need to focus on. So we have a bunch of ITSM features to work on, and I'll let one of these guys touch on that more. I think the incident management is a big one, and that's sort of more integration with Opsgenie and bringing some of that functionality on board inside JSM. And the kind of the next big thing is data residency, and so there are from the parts of JSM that are in Jira are sort of residency compliant because Jira is, but there's a bunch of ancillary services that do important work that are not currently data residency compliant, and we would like to achieve data residency by adopting platform storage that sort of solves that problem. And rather than going and implementing it and then there being a TDP solution which provides same, let's just skip to the end and leverage a best-in-class sort of governance compliant solution from TDP. So I think that's super important to us, and I think we would probably want to be early adopters as early as possible to make that work for us, because that's residency is becoming a big issue for us, and I think that it will be more work for us to go do it on our own, and then we're behind the ball of not actually being on a platform solution yet. So that's a big area of focus, and dependency. I know Guido has been talking to Andre about that stuff.
Yeah, maybe to add on that point, this also is sort of a crosswind to building new services. So that smart solution we just talked about, data residency came up, and the number of questions that the team asks and basically the number of requirements that come up in that regard, you make it pretty obvious it's relatively hard to build something new and ship something new, and so that we know this doesn't just, it's not just a problem for the existing services that we have that we need to make data residency compliant. It also slows us down when building new things, because in the past we could ignore that aspect, and with FY22 we basically can't anymore. We have to get this work.
Yeah, I think it's important that, like, residency is super important to our customers. So I think it's not a, I don't think of that as a tax. I think of it as, you know, something that customers need, but getting there we want to get there in a way that is, you know, sort of feature looking, and we want to leverage the platform to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the sort of that holistic picture of how we think about how we deal with solutions, and there's a bunch of stuff, but anyway, we'll get there. I'll let one of you guys talk about cross deployments if you don't mind.
Yeah, so cross deployments is basically having a mix of server products linked together with cloud products. Yeah, I assume this is actually not JSD or GSM specific. The project brief, which I haven't heard of before, sounds like that it is actually targeted to the aspects of import and export. So import and export, I think GSM just has to deal with that problem, like Jira Platform and Confluence has to deal with that problem. Cross deployments, I think is across all the different products. I wanted to mention this one because we didn't find a good platform solution that would help us build it out. Maybe there's something out there, maybe there's not. Timeline wise, we know this for a few years, and eventually when Care Bear is over in a few years, it becomes less important. So it's probably more time critical if there's something there that we could leverage. The next point is JSM as a solution, as an ITSM solution, we know that we want to expand the offering and add additional functionality, and it's very likely, or I think it's likely to certain that we're going to have more acquisitions or services that we want to bring into the fold. And so integrating additional components into the overall solution is a really important aspect to us, which actually closely aligns with new services or new products that we want to build out. In our case, we just want to plug them into the existing solution. Last but not least, identity and access. JSM and identity, everyone who knows us, it's been a long-term engagement, and over the years we've achieved a lot of important milestones. The most recent is that we are onboarding customer account sessions onto identity, which takes out a big sort of wrinkle in the overall integration story. There are additional features that we are looking for. So one is around having identity manage access for our customer portal. A similar one is actually have identity manage access to Insight, which is another feature that we now integrated into JSM. Short term, we just rely on Jira permissions, but longer term, ideally, we split that out. And so that's basically an area where we'd like to get more support from platform. The other part is around access integration. There's on an ITSM level, there's a need to bring Active Directory information like employees, managers, or locations into the system, so we can use that in automation and smarts when assigning tickets and when helping out users. And currently there's no good solution how we can bring that into the cloud. That given access already integrates with those systems from an authentication perspective, we see synergies to build on top of that for our needs as well. Yeah, let's. I'd say we move on to platform challenges.
Yes, I think like we said earlier on, the big challenge for us has been sort of composing a solution and dealing with the how do we route between how do we provision a thing that's not sort of within the scope of a Jira activation ID, and how do we then tie that to Jira, and how do we do API routing and all that sort of stuff. And eventually we would like that API routing layer to just sort of deal with sharding, not just region level sharding, but sharding at a I have some number of shards in a region or in a realm, and it just sort of becomes magic from a platform routing layer. And we had to sort of blaze new trails there to get stuff done for CMDB. And I think that's fine. I think what it highlights is that we need a really cohesive story around how you compose solutions out of what are essentially technologies and not products anymore. And so some of that is bound up in I know we spent a lot of time on TLT yesterday, and I don't want to beat that horse. It's not some of the difficulties there are really symptoms of needing to sort of tease apart some of those pieces, so that so it's easier to compose. If we wanted to provision Confluence as part of JSM, because it really is part of the solution for knowledge base, that going to a sort of new definition of that composition of a solution should be something that we eventually is easy to do. And then how all of those sort of provisioned workspaces or activation IDs hold together at a logical level for the customer, and then can I apply residency to all of those in one go? Are we even allowed, we want to build this smart experience around data from Confluence and JSM. Can we even do that? Like, are those things even in the same realm? How do we deal with that sort of stuff? So that sort of next layer up of composition of solution is a real challenge for us, and it ties back to data residency as sort of the first of the governance requirements that makes this difficult, because there is so much tied in with data residency. There's so much there's so much down in the goo of API routing, and how do we send a request to the right place, and when messages are coming off of StreamHub and that tenant has moved, how do we send those to the right place? And there are, we've sort of worked out solutions for some of that stuff, but it is cumbersome, and I think increasingly this will be an increasingly difficult area, because it is. Another acquisition will be another good example, or another thing. I imagine Compass is running into some of the same challenges around sort of provisioning and workspaces and life cycle, and how those things hold together. Did I buy JSM and there's sort of an activation ID there's a tenant ID or activation ID for that, and everything else hangs off of that. Anyway, there are a bunch of questions there that I think are things we really need to focus on. So our theme of challenges all sort of circles around that, which is the stuff we've talked about. And I don't think we don't need to dwell on it too much, but I think this is going to be our challenge from aside from just meeting data residency requirements by adopting platform solutions. There's we would like to get the machine learning folks onto the machine learning platform as soon as possible, and things like that. But this is the biggest challenge, I think, from holistically for us. There's the other one that sort of comes up frequently and with increasing frequency is we don't really have a good way to identify services that are part of the system to do work, where they are sort of performing actions that normally would require a user. I think that's something that we need to work out. I think have some ideas on a proposal, and we can talk to identity about that. And there's a new API for minting UCTs. We are using that, but we're sort of, it's always the process of adopting that is we need to have a meeting and discussion, because the scope of what that service is then allowed to do is unbounded. And so things around sort of tighter management of scopes for those UCTs and a maybe service proxy based sort of coarse grained enforcement of that stuff. And I mean, there's a bunch of sort of ideas in that direction, but this is a problem that comes up not every week, but like almost.
Very often.
And it's probably one that's fairly easy to come up with a better solution than what we have today. I don't know. Do you guys? Is there other things we want to say about either residency or?
I'm probably gonna beat the workspace that house again. The one confusion maybe in that area stems from maybe us not fully understanding where the manifold project ends. I've called it out yesterday. The current collaboration model talks about content and containers, and then this elusive thing on top that we recently called a workspace. Well, I'm not even sure whether as Atlassian as a whole we even agreed that this is called a workspace. Above that you have sites, and then you have an organization. Those three top level containers, organization, site, and workspaces, I'd like to see a much clearer definition across Atlassian, what that means and how things are related to each other. When we integrated the insights, so that's the CMDB solution, into JSM, we consciously went with going with a new workspace instead of just storing everything against the Jira activation ID. And it flushed out a lot of these problems that in the past we could work around by basically staying within a single bubble. And it basically, it raised a lot of these new problems. And I think this is only, this is gonna continue. It's probably gonna get worse. And so I feel as an architects group, we also need to focus on that area. I don't know whether it's part of Manifold or whether it's something else. I just want to raise that again. I think it's important we make progress in that regard and how these things link to each other. And yes, it ties in with data residency and routing and all the things.
Yeah, just quickly on that, there's a few, let me take offline. There's a few things that I think tie together. One is, so are there clear definitions? There actually is a pretty clear definition. Like the problem is we do not share it very widely and it's not well known. And then the second part is we haven't got all the tools that actually enable you to do that. So we take shortcuts like use sites because we don't have everything set up because we still have sites around. So there's a few things we need to tackle. But yeah, that's a valid point. I think, anyway, we could tackle it offline. I think there's, I hear you. I share the pain. I feel the pain. Yeah. It's been a long challenge for many years. So, yeah.
I have a clarifying question.
To answer your question, I think you can say yes, it's part of the manifold remit, and as Sydney mentioned, something that is a pain for many, but being solved through that work group. So it'd be good to have you in that work group as well and just talk to Sydney about that. Sorry, Oliver, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a clarifying question. Is cross deployments what's also known as a hybrid cloud? Like it's the idea that the customers, what is cross deployments?
Yeah, well, none of us three actually works on that specifically. It's really having, for example, Jira Software in server and Jira Services in server, and then Confluence, which provides the KB or knowledge base functionality of service desk actually lives in cloud.
Yeah. So or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
Yeah, so this is what we're doing right now. So connecting a JSM to a Confluence knowledge base that lives in server, or supporting those cases where a customer buys a JSM in cloud because maybe it's their first foray into a JSM, but then they have a high presence of server products that they're not ready yet to move in cloud, but we still want to have a JSM as that first foothold in cloud, and allowing them to connect to a Jira site or a Confluence site in server and start getting used to working with cloud tools before they actually can move everything to server.
Sort of a boon for migration, because it helps, if you think about an entire solution and not being able to sort of move all of that in one go, It will help customers move pieces of it that they can, like you said, that they can sort of get comfortable with, and then move another piece. And yeah.
It's I guess to some extent JSM is hit by this harder than other products because we are actually the definition of a product is it's sort of getting very blurry in JSM. We integrated Confluence and Jira now with Opsgenie. We actually take the incident functionality in Opsgenie and we integrate them into Jira issues. And so Opsgenie basically becomes an under the hood service to provide all that functionality, but it is exposed through Jira as a product or through JSM as a product rather. And so because you bring those different pieces together, that poses a double challenge when you go from server, when you migrate from server to cloud, where you ultimately migrate individual components and are not the full solution as a whole. We actually also in cloud face similar problems around import and export. When you export JSM with incidents that live in Opsgenie, what does that even mean? What should an export do? We just don't have answers for these questions.
Thank you.
All right, any last comments? Otherwise, we'll transition on. All right, moving on to Trello, Chad.
Okay, hear me, see the presentation, all the good stuff.
We can actually see both screens, like the whole big monitor screen.
There we go. There we go. So yeah, want to talk a little bit about, start out talking about Trello as a whole and kind of give a little bit of context about what we're thinking about as a product when we're building Trello and what's important to us and what because it often feeds into engineering decisions and platform decisions that we make and architecture decisions. Talk a little about stuff we're working on, stuff we have in flight that's hopefully relevant to folks here, and then spend a good amount of time thinking about the things that we're more worried about and want to follow up on. So Trello, one of the interesting things I think that's a little different from some of the others, similar to Confluence, is that we're an all teams product. And that definitely affects kind of the design approach and the engineering approach because of not just targeting IT teams and dev teams means it always wants to come across as simple, simple and fast and responsive because of a little bit. Those get a high priority based off the audience and the number of people different types of people that are using Trello and the different ways that they're using it. We talk a lot about things being Trello-y. It's not just cards on a board, but there's a lot of thought goes into a lot of the nuances of it. We used to joke we'd have competitor like people that would be cloning Trello and stuff. The joke was always, but do the cards tilt? Because when you drag a card on Trello, it tilts 10 degrees as you drag it. And there's all these little nuances trying to approach that that non-technical feel like the way we ended up adding due dates was this like multi-year process and discussion to what comes across as a very simple mechanic. It's also very fluid. Generally, the people using it are using it with fluid models of workflows. It's being used for lots of things besides just, it used to be, we used to talk about that, it's not just for project management, that's definitely what a lot of paying users are using it for, but there's lots of different workflows and stuff. And that tends to affect kind of the choices we make and the way we design it. So leading that means that certain things historically have been very important to us. We've been API first pretty much since the beginning. So we have a single API used by our consumers, our mobile, our web, desktop clients, third-party clients, Zapier, all those, they all use the same API. We've got some restricted endpoints, like you can't maybe change your password with a given token, but generally you can build a Trello client with the API without working at Atlassian, which has been to our benefit. Butler was built completely outside of Trello, outside of Atlassian, because of using that API, and then we acquired it and became part of it. Our first desktop app for Windows was written by someone as a side project while working at Microsoft, and then now he works here. And so that's been something that we that is served as well. We also generally only have one API. We don't have like a separate third-party API, which we have some opinions on that I can talk about later. Scale is pretty big for us. We do have a shared architecture since because of the youth of the product when it was made, less than 10 years ago, means that we're one shared architecture, one giant Mongo cluster, one that has some benefits. It's really cheap per user. Any given user is essentially free. I think, on average, historically we're around like 5 cents a user. I don't have the current number for our run cost. And so that's worked really well. It does often mean that it affects some of our choices as far as architecture and design, but it's got some benefits as well. It also means that pretty much everything we do ends up having to scale horizontally for our user base. Once it gets outside of feature flags and outside of that, like pretty much even mundane features, everything has to scale to across that architecture, across that whole user base. Speeds definitely a feature for Trello as well. It's a real-time app. There's no reloads generally. We had a huge GTM launch yesterday with lots of different views and lots of different things we've added, timeline views and counter views and all these different ways of using Trello. But a lot of that piece of going for speed, going for not having to reload to see the updates. When I move a card, you see the card move. Like it's definitely a collaborative app before it is anything else. Before it's designed to be a collaboration tool, even more so than it is a data storage tool. And so that also enters into a lot of the trade-offs that we make when we're choosing things and how we approach things. Just for reference, a little bit current scale. So we've got just under 10 million MAU. We hit around 1.5 to 2 million at peak concurrent users. About 1 billion API requests a day. Tons of data, lots of boards and members. That volume, we're generally currently, this isn't necessarily a target, but just currently our average mean API response, it's a weird metric because it's like the average of the means across each of our compute nodes is around 80 milliseconds right now. And our longest 90th percentile on those compute nodes, if you average, is under 200 milliseconds. So we do go, that's just API server, that's not end-to-end, that's API processing time. And we've got lots of small customers, tons of small customers. A lot of our money comes from average team size can be super small if you look at our metrics, but we also have some really big customers. Our largest org has over 267,000 members, users in it, and over 55,000 workspaces. They're about 10x larger than our next largest. So they're definitely the big user. They're the Atlassian of Confluence for Trello. But we've got a big enterprise investment that we're making. And so we're going after more of those customers. And so that starts to get into needing to scale more vertically in certain areas to be able to scale and go after more of those size orgs. All that kind of means to be that as a starting point, this isn't generally, things need to be low latency. They need to generally be designed to be able to support non-tenanted approaches, loosely coupled, high speed, be able, we want to be able to scale to 5 million concurrent users pretty much off the bat. Those are all those are all important right off the bat for things that we're adopting. Otherwise, it's bringing other challenges with it that sometimes outweigh the benefits that we might getting. So that's often a starting point or a starting discussion point when we're talking about adopting platform services and things like that. And sometimes that is different, especially that non-tenant model. We know that we're not as much in line with several other Atlassian products, and so that can sometimes introduce challenges that platform teams have had to work with us to work around. Yeah, what we're currently working on. I will say so. Atlassian account. This has been. Trello's been part of Atlassian for 4 years now. Definitely the vast majority of its of my time there. We've been working on Atlassian account almost since the beginning. It was many years. At one point we had 4 teams working on Atlassian account, access, identity, and all of those pieces. We're down to 1. We're working on the existing migration of some of those 119 million or those 50 million users or whatever that we're trying to bring over. The 119 million number includes deleted accounts. So we're kind of in the home stretch on Atlassian account and identity of migrating all of the existing users. New signups are all Atlassian account, but it's still, it's definitely was a lot of work, and that's still finishing up. We've reinvested in enterprise. That took a bit of a pause as we focus on business class and other features, but we're scaling up 2 teams to focus on enterprise high touch customers. In particular, one of those teams, their roadmap, I linked this on the under the 6-page or under the 1-pager, is almost exclusively focused on enterprise features that require collaboration with platform tools. So we've kind of split that. Initially, the first take on those roadmaps for the next year is one of those teams is focused on things that are often likely going to be developed within Trello, and another is going to be focused almost exclusively on things that are expected to leverage platform and need help in partnering with platform, enterprise platform to accomplish. A caveat there is those aren't even the big rocks that we've talked about. They're not BYOK and data residency. It's onboarding and migration and all these smaller pieces that we found are important for our potential enterprise customers. Vital stats is how we're approaching real-time, real user capability monitoring. It's capability monitoring end to end. We've had a whole lot of success with it. It's working. It's keeping the front end platform in mind as far as how we do it. It's leveraging signal effects. It's leveraging Socrates, and it's been. And so we're using that as a mechanism for how we distribute ownership across Trello's 18 engineering teams, given the large amount of monolith we have. Glassmoose is the cheeky name that we've given to our ongoing low-level platform migration. Trello started, it's always been cloud, or been designed for cloud, but for the longest time, we used AWS as a data center, and we were running almost everything on EC2. That's evolved over time, but we're really taking a concerted effort now, especially because of FedRAMP compliance requirements that we're doing, and the patching, patch management requirements, and the upkeep and the cost of that. We're going all in on moving pretty much everything that we can over to Micros or managed AWS services. Our Elasticsearch we moved to AWS. And going more cattle, more immutability to reduce that load and take advantage of those scaling options. The views work is interesting. Trello traditionally has definitely been boards on cards. Everything is board centric. Our architecture design, our data design was all around sharded off the board ID because you were on a board and that's where your permissions were based on. Maybe they rolled up to a workspace or an org, but we still could narrow it down to that board container. That's changing a bit. Now we have multi-board views where you're looking at things across your entire workspace. You may be wanting to look at board data and different views across your entire enterprise. And so that's definitely heavy on how we approach our data schema and how we scale that and shift, because that's a big shift for us to be able to support these new functionalities and new views. And then workspaces is another one. Getting everyone into a workspace. You could have private boards that weren't attached to a workspace historically. We're working on fixing that, and also trying to, again, kind of expand people beyond that board view to that slightly larger your workspace team, and not a 4,000 person team or an Atlassian level team, but the 100 people or the 10 people that you work with in workspaces. So there's a lot of work there that we're working on. So yeah. Platformy things, dependencies, stuff we're talking about and worrying about. A lot of this is a rehash of stuff that I put on the 1-pager, so you can also read it there. Data residency, BYOK, all the enterprise stuff is certainly high on our mind. One of the ones in particular is kind of often an elephant in the room is Mongo. We have a very large Mongo cluster. Half of our infrastructure is our Mongo cluster. We're very, it's not our only data store. We have Elasticsearch, we have some RDS, Butler runs on DynamoDB, but the vast majority of our data and our interactions with it is very is all in Mongo, and it's scaled very well horizontally for us. But the amount of work to decouple that would essentially be a rewrite of Trello, and so we don't have any current plans. When I say current, let's say maybe the 3-year time horizon of moving away from it because it continues to work for us. We also can't necessarily move to a managed solution. Atlas isn't FedRAMP compliant. DocumentDB doesn't support data sites of our size, and also we're well beyond their compatibility layer because of the API that they support. So when we look at these currently, Mongo staying in the mix is kind of the starting point for a lot of discussions. Nothing's really sacrosanct. We're not completely banned, but the level of effort to move away from that, when I've talked with Andre about the plans for TDP and things like that, are significant. So what that means is we're really interested in how we leverage TLT, provisioner, profile, all that metadata to not have to solve the realm data, not have to solve the high level pieces. Like I think we're really need to interested to have conversations over the next year and starting now about how we can not have to do the high level lift, that we can just, if we know how to solve realm data residency within Mongo, but we don't want to have to handle key management. We don't have to handle all those workspace preferences and have to duplicate that. And also, if we have other data stores that might be able to be leveraged on TDP or might be able to be on microdata that get that data residency and those things for free, we wanted to play well with the pieces that are in Mongo. So I think that's a big want from us to be able to integrate well with that and have those similar to what some of the other products have talked about, have that modularity to be able to have opinionated profiles and approaches that are Atlassian wide, but be able to potentially like still manage the pieces that might be an unreasonable amount of effort to move away from. Speed is important, as I mentioned yesterday. Fast is your action stuff. What that means, like there's a lot of pieces that have overhead, speed, cost, and there's benefit to that, but we need to understand what those are and what the threshold is and which are the paper cuts we're taking on that speed to make sure it's worth it. So yeah, that's certainly something that's on our mind. Our enterprise patterns, I think we're already talking with the Access and the Admin Hub folks, like I said, for that enterprise team. Trello's mapping to the collaboration model might be different from some of the others. And so I don't think that there's very many Jira Confluence organizations that have 55,000 workspaces. And so there may be some UI and some different changes that have to be made to be able to leverage Admin Hub for those types of ones. And we certainly don't want to have to reinvent the wheel and do that ourselves when there's functionality that can live there. One that came up, I added this service proxy. I think a lot of there's pieces that were talked about yesterday that kind of implicitly seem like they felt like they relied on service proxy being ubiquitous throughout. And I don't think service proxy supports everything yet, necessarily things that might not be in micros yet and the like. And so interested in how we can get there if that's a requirement, so that we can, because that seems like it's a piece to help us be able to take advantage of a lot of the things that were talked about yesterday. Manifold IV graphs. This probably gets a little bit beyond the FY22, but super interested in this. There's a Loom that I linked under the 6-pager column where Michael talks about Trello being this builder platform, right? And I think that meshes really well with the vision behind Manifold and the GraphQL gateway. And so what's interesting to me, I think we need to work is how we mesh that with that single API and not wanting to have a second one. And so can we get, I'm really curious to see if we can get to the point where that is the Trello API and that our existing one, and that it's a very thin layer on top of, and we become, that becomes a thing that we build on top of as well. And how we tackle that and how we migrate so that we're not having two sources of truth, and so that we don't have things that, and so, that's a really interesting piece for me. GraphQL is big. We haven't, our web client is GraphQL based, but they're using Apollo and it's a proxy layer and they're still hitting our REST API. We haven't tackled GraphQL on the back end yet within the API. And so meshing our approach there and our roadmap there with our roadmap for Atlassian's GraphQL Gateway, I think is really important and something that's really worth talking about more. Commerce Forge. When do we tend to, we still have our own billing system. So understanding when's the best time to migrate. We don't sell power-ups. We don't support a marketplace for our power-ups. So this also starts to meshes in with Forge, because I think Forge and the ecosystem folks are solving a lot of the exact same problems that we're solving with our power-up and our power-up ecosystem. And so figuring out how we can put those together and if there's a way to adopt faster, I think is really interesting. It's not something that we currently have funded. I don't think Forge does either, but it seems a bit redundant, and because a lot of the same problem spaces that I see them tackling. I don't think we've done a good job historically, real quick, of things that we think we're doing well that we could share out, and you know, we've probably been a little bit more, we're trying to be less isolated at Trello. We've done, and so we're real interested in the pub sub service stuff that's been rolled in and shifted around recently, and how that meshes with our own pub sub service that we've built ourselves and our strategy there. Would love to talk more. I know Sebastian, who's here as well, has reached out a little bit about that. And so Vital Stats, I know they've tried to keep the front end platform folks, the unified front end folks in the loop, and tried to build it in a way that, but working with front end and observability, potentially, if that's something worth extending beyond Trello. Running short on time, so talk about our preview stuff as well. Hot takes about yesterday. Off the cuff, I think so real quick, Dev Life, a lot of the same problems that we're dealing with. Really interested to stay in touch with that. Observability and networking, generally the lower level stuff, the easier it is for us to adopt, because we have the same requirements of any product. The more interesting nuances of a product, I think, come out when you're higher up, right? Like the differences in Eder and stuff. But I think our needs from network engineering have been very similar to others. And so that's worked really well for adoptability. Observability, our biggest pain point is speed. We're aiming for 4 nines. And so when it takes 30 seconds to load a Splunk dashboard, or 15 seconds to load Splunk with no search, those definitely start to impact our time to diagnose, right? And our time to recovery. Overall, the view of observer source and stuff, I get and I agree with. DR doesn't apply too much to us and stuff, because since we're managing Mongo's backups ourselves right now, I worry about UPP because we do have serverless stuff, and also that cost on the pipeline and how we solve it. I talked about Manifold. The data team stuff, I think, is I'm really interested in. I'm really curious to see how we solve as a company with BYOK and all of the how we walk that line of leveraging ML and that data access with those challenges. All the change data capture solutions, I think, I'm really curious to see how we can mesh with, because we have our own for like getting stuff into Elasticsearch, and can we better leverage stuff from team data. Yeah, I'm out of time, so I'm going to cut it short. The last thing I'd say is that we're kind of, Trello's a bit of, we are kind of an acquisition story. We're 4 years in, and we have a large code infrastructure that we had to bring into Atlassian. And so I think a lot of the challenges that we've run into, we'll run into again with other significant acquisitions, and so we should continue to try to solve them. We've made huge progress over in the 4 years. And it's already much better than it was 4 years ago. But yeah, just want to keep that stuff in mind as we move forward. That's all I got.
All right, thanks, Chad. Next up is Christopher and Bitbucket.
Hello. Sharing everything. Hey everybody, I'm Chris. I'm on the Bitbucket team. I've been working on the Bitbucket team for about 7 years. I cannot find my mouse to be able to get the Zoom window out of the way. Let's try that again. All right. Can people see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I want to kind of start with an FY21 recap because it tells a pretty good platform story for Bitbucket. Up until last year, we have been very light on the platform adoption on Bitbucket. I think similar to a lot of things that Chad said, Bitbucket is also an acquisition story. It just happens to be an acquisition story that's a lot older. I've been here 7 years, and I joined Atlassian on the Bitbucket team. So the acquisition is going on something like 10 years now. But I think a lot of the story was the same. We were built on a different software stack with a different data model. In a lot of ways similar to Trello. We have a large user base. We were not built in silos, and so a lot of platform adoption has been hard for us. There's been some things we've been ideal citizens on. We were one of the early teams who had adopted Atlassian accounts, but for a bunch of other stuff, we've been trailing behind because it's been a slog for us. We are also very unprepared to talk about what platform pieces we're going to be using in FY22. We haven't done planning yet. And right before last calendar year started, in December 2019, we were told that we had 6 months to get out of our data center. We were able to push back on that a little bit, but the fact of the matter is that we had been in the data center and we needed to get out, and Atlassian wanted us out of there as well. So we had 6 months to come up with a plan and try and execute on it. We did not immediately go out of the data center. What we did was we set up 2 separate teams, one working on moving Bitbucket to AWS outside of micros, and one that was moving us to a second data center. And the teams kind of raced to see who would get ahead. And the second data center team won, but that was a temporary relief for us. We knew that we were going to have to move to something in the cloud instead. So this is a very, very rough model of what Bitbucket looks like in our data center today. We have a bunch of microliths. We have the Bitbucket application that runs in a whole bunch of different profiles, and they share a whole bunch of data. It's not fair to say that Bitbucket completely runs in a data center. We have pipelines, we have search, we have deployments, we have some parts of the Git cloning experience that all run in micros today. We run some of our auxiliary stuff that we need, some Redis, some Postgres replicas, and some other data stuff that we use in a separate AWS account that wasn't micros. But for the most part, we had what we think of as Bitbucket core, or at least those of us who've been working on it a long time, worked in this Ash2 data center. And we needed to get all that data out into micros. Oh, we originally thought we were going to move to EC2, and after we had completed this move to data centers, we decided that we were going to go all in on micros. And that took a bunch of work, not just from our team, but we were able to, the network team and the micros team stepped up to make a bunch of things work that weren't very micro-Z. We share all of our data stores. We moved to Aurora, or we're moving to Aurora. We're using Redis and Memcache as micros managed resources, but those are shared across all of our different microliths. The micros team built out, so a lot of the stuff that Nicholas talked about yesterday with the isolated VPCs and dedicated subnets, that work kind of came out of the stuff that we were doing for Bitbucket. So we've been trying to gradually move more onto the platform. Unfortunately, because this work wasn't planned for, this threw a huge wrench into our FY21 plans, which meant that we were completely unprepared for FY22. So we've been in the process of figuring out what we want to do for FY22. We know that the big thing that we need to work on is our enterprise story. Care Bear has come up. Bitbucket was built, Bitbucket Cloud, I should say, was built to be a lighter weight product. We've always targeted small teams, the 10 to 20 developer size teams. And with the whole Care Bear story, we need to try and move over customers that have been Bitbucket Server customers. The Bitbucket Server and Bitbucket Cloud don't really share a lineage in the way that Jira Server and Jira Cloud or Confluence Server and Confluence Cloud do. They're completely separate code bases, and Bitbucket Server grew a lot of features early on to try and accommodate large teams. And Bitbucket Cloud is never worried about those. And so on a non-platform front, we are trying to kind of go through and patch together what is going on in Bitbucket Cloud to make sure that it can support the features that are going to be expected for people coming over on the platform. There are, excuse me, three major themes of projects that we know that we're working on in FY22 that I think interact in a pretty strong way with the platform. And these are kind of listed in the order of how well we understand the problem that we're trying to solve. So the first thing that we're trying to tackle is user management. So user management today, Bitbucket has a really lightweight view of what user management is. It doesn't, we have Atlassian accounts, but the actual management of who has access to what projects and repositories is all done through the Bitbucket UI. We want to be on Admin Hub. There's already a project underway. It started 6 months ago, roughly. And it is ongoing. We had originally thought that we were going to serve as we took the kind of typical route that Bitbucket has taken and use the platform as lightly as possible. So we wanted to have to basically sync all of the data that was coming out of the USS into our own databases. That's kind of how we had gotten onto Atlassian accounts originally, and that was the original approach that we tried to take with the GDPR work that needed to get done. So we were going to have shoulder taps coming in and letting us know when data was available, and we were going to sync the data over. Identity wanted to move away from that model, and so they're moving to this event stream model to let you know what changes were available. And we found ourselves in a situation where we were building out a brand new service to try and keep that data in sync and then still sync the Bitbucket database. And so we kind of took a step back and said, this is the perfect opportunity for us to try and do things with the platform. So we have decided to go all in on having at least new teams get managed by the platform completely. So we're taking our permissions for those teams out of the Bitbucket database and having those managed by the permission service. The user access and group management will be handled by Admin Hub, and the product access management is still good. The UI will still live in Bitbucket, but we're pushing all those changes through, finding information about groups through USS, and trying to make the whole story a little bit more of a platform story. So work is underway. We started this very late in FY21, so we did not get a lot of platform resources because they didn't know that we were going to need them. But in order for Bitbucket to make this work, we've already had some discussions with those teams that we're going to need a lot of platform help to try and make APIs available for us to use to give us some of the features that and performance that we need out of our permission system and the user management screens. So I think that most of the platform teams that need to know about those that are involved with those things. Sorry. The platform teams that need to interact with those teams are already engaged, but we'll need to do a little bit more planning as FY22 rolls around. The next project that we are trying to work on is something that is being called Git Agents internally. It is a project that was started by the Bitbucket server team to try and address some of their performance needs in the data center. And they're building it in a way that they want to have Bitbucket Cloud as a client as well. So as a quick overview of the way Bitbucket works is we have all these various services that need to talk to repositories, and it's all done over NFS. So every service mounts every volume in this giant NetApp cluster that we have over NFS, and we execute very low-level disk commands to be able to fetch them because we're just using the Git client. So if when Git wants to read a commit off disk, it is going to open that file on disk and read it. And so we have this huge mesh, and we make lots and lots of little requests. And if you look back at that, on that earlier slide, we have pulled that NetApp out of our data center, and we are now talking to it in a completely separate data center. So we're increasing latency here. And so when we have a really chatty protocol here, like NFS is when trying to use Git, our performance is going to suffer. And so Git agents, the Git agents model is that we're going to have a bunch of high-level operations, and we have these Git agents clusters that run a small subset of the repository data for specific customers, ideally. And so they're going to expose a gRPC API, and we will interact that way. And our goal in the Bitbucket Cloud team is to find a way to make these Git agents work in the cloud. So I suspect we're going to need a lot of time, a lot of help from the Micros data team. But as we hear these presentations about data stores in general, I think it would be great if we can find a way to make these Git agent nodes play nicely with a lot of the other platform data initiatives. These are not going to work perfectly as a microservice as they exist today. They're going to have state. The idea of this is they will attach EBS volumes so that they can read the repository data a lot faster. And and they will do their own data resiliency in these little pods of nodes. Downsides of NFS, right now it costs us a lot, our performance hurts. One thing that now that we're moving into micros is that our storage is not going to live in the same data center that we are today. So like we have to deal with the idea that NetApp's data centers can go down separate from AWS going down, and what that means for our customers when that happens. And our current architecture isn't going to allow us to easily support things like bring your own key. And we think that the whole idea that these Git pods are going to allow us to configure various pods to support keys for specific customers, that we can support more performance tiers for important customers and the like. So yeah, platform, we need Micros data support. I'm trying to get through slides quickly so to keep us on time. And the third area that we want to focus on is our ecosystem play. And this is the foggiest thing that I have on these slides. And that's partially because we don't know exactly what we want to do, and I'm less sure of exactly how we're going to handle that as we've sat through these presentations in the last day and a half. Bitbucket has always done its own ecosystem thing as well. We have our own implementation of OAuth. We have our own implementation of Connect. Both of them have downsides. They were designed in the 2010s when I think the model of what we want out of security was different. When you grant an OAuth token to when a user gets an OAuth, grants access to their account for an OAuth consumer, that OAuth consumer can access all of the data that user has access to. Since we have this increased focus on enterprise features, that's not really something that's flying with a lot of the customers that we're talking to. They want a lot more control over what data gets exposed. We know that we want to use platform for this. Over the last 2 to 3 years, I've had conversations with a bunch of the platform teams about how we're going to onboard to a lot of the platform that kind of make up the ecosystem. And it's not easy. There's not a really clear path to me right now. This may have changed in the last months or year or so, but it's hard for us to get on this platform. And one of the things I would love out of this is to find a way for us to deprecate or migrate our current add-ons into the CAS Forge permissions ecosystem, and do that in a way that is appropriate for the way that we want to use the platform going forward. Another big motivator for this is that a lot of Bitbucket server customers use a lot of custom add-ons to try and get the functionality that they want. And those are developed by third parties. Bitbucket Cloud today has no ability to offer paid add-ons. And so this is something we want to be able to do, is find a way for us to be able to have paid add-ons so that we can attract those developers to offer services, offer the same types of add-ons they're offering for Bitbucket server today, so that we can attract those customers over, because a lot of them are not going to move over if we can't offer them the same workflows that they have today. And with that, I think I'm about time, and so I will quit there.
Thanks, Chris. We have just a minute if anyone has any clarifying questions. Okay, so what we'll do is we have one last presentation, Chris, on Compass. So we'll have him do his presentation, and then we've been going pretty hard. So we'll take we'll pull up the 5-minute break, take a break. People can step away, get a drink of water or whatever you need, coffee, and then we'll come back and do the Q&A for this session, but just giving a little bit of break in between. So Chris, with that, I'll hand it over to you.
Maybe I can finish in 5 minutes and everybody has 20-minute break. Let's see if I can do that.
There you go.
All right. I still get nervous when I talk, and I've been talking about Compass for months now. All right. Get situated. All right, Compass. So this is me, Chris. I think most of y'all know who I am. If not, I was previously architect at Micros. A couple months ago, I moved to Compass when they did the Go Big launch, or Rocket Fuel. I forgot which one they called it, but anyway. Basically, Compass was a project that went from a small team that works, I think they were part of the NPF, the new product framework. And over the course of 6 months, they built something out. And around November, they decided to double down on it and grow the team from something like 10 people to 50 some people, and deliver a lot more features for it. And that was part of that big growth, I guess. Some disclaimers. And this Compass is 100% on platform. Like, we see it as investment. We are putting a lot of effort toward it. In fact, even helping some of the platform teams improve their offerings in a sense, right? And I'll talk about this a lot more in my talk. We use a lot of platform currently, and probably will use a lot more in the coming year. The goal for me, at least for Compass, is not to deal with data as much as possible. Like, transform it, manipulate it, shove it in a storage system, don't care about it after that. I want platform to care about it. I want platform to deal with all that baggage. I don't want to deal with compliance. I don't want to deal with replication. I don't want to deal with anything. All right. That's if I had one ask out of this whole thing, it's that. Just make it so I don't have to provision storage. I just use a managed API for storage. Right. And when I say storage, I mean like analytics, transactions, search, everything. All that falls in that bucket. Disclaimer 3. Compass is 100% focused on delivering on the third-party first initiative. What that means is our goals with our APIs, it's just like Trello's goals, is there's no private API. The front end is going to consume one API set. That API is going to be published via the GraphQL gateway. Hopefully, it'll all be defined within Manifold. That's a different discussion for later, and so forth. All right, I'm not going to talk about what Compass is today. That's in the pre-reads. Shame on you if you didn't read your pre-reads. I read them, or I skimmed them. It's fine. There's a video talking there as well. You can watch that. What the heck is Compass? It was given for the tech team's principal engineering sync a week ago, so it's pretty fresh. Here's my talk today. Why you shouldn't build a new product. All right. So I'm taking a different tack. Like, everybody talked about what their plans are for the next coming year. Like, I've done that for months now. Like, I've sat for months planning what we're going to be doing for Compass for the next year or so. I'm tired of that talk. What now I'm going to tell you is why we should never build another product, right? Don't do it. It's a pain in the ass. And here's why. Oh, here's my agenda today. It's all in pictures. You can look at these real quick, try to decide for yourself. It will make sense to you. Don't worry about it. All right. The lizard. Yay, Jira, right? It's a Gojira giant lizard. There you go. There's a lizard. One of the complications we found was a lot of times when there's a platform offering, it really targets Jira and or Confluence. It isn't, like, sad to say, it wasn't targeting Trello or Bitbucket or whomever else. Like, Jira and Confluence basically are the 500-pound silverback gorillas in the company, and you put them on a little rowboat with all the other products, and they basically can move the boat in any direction they want or dump everybody overboard. And the interesting thing is like Robbie earlier mentioned, like Jira is also a platform, and it is true. It's a platform on which like a number of recent acquisitions were acquired because they run on that platform. Bunch of new products are coming out, things like Team Central or Polaris. I don't remember the code names. It's not named after a fruit anymore, so I forget what it's called. And of course, you all know like JSD was one of those things, right? Like JSD, and which is now JSM. Jira, it's all about Jira. That's Atlassian. This is one reason why it's difficult to build a new product in Atlassian. A lot of platforms focus on Jira's and or Confluence's needs. When we approached like teams, when we decided to go big, we're like, okay, what does it mean to go big? What are the features to build out? Oh, search. All right. We want to integrate with search. Well, we didn't realize until we started talking with them that it was built specifically for Confluence, even though it's called Search Platform. We're working with them, like I mentioned on the earlier slide, to help them bridge that gap, to make it more generic, not just for Compass needs, but other products that come down later, right? So we're not even building a Compass specific search experience in Search Platform. It's going to be a generic thing. And we're doing it with that team. The same thing is true with Forge. I know like Rowan or somebody here will probably yell foul at me for saying that, but honestly, like, I don't think anybody else has integrated with Forge other than like Jira and Confluence. And I believe from my experience and what my observations is that it was pretty obvious when there has to be a spike to see if it's possible for another product to integrate with Forge. And it happens not just with those two. It happens down the list of almost everything here. All right. So that's first point. Second point. Every time we have to engage with a team, it requires an engagement. Like we basically have to go there, propose to them, tell them how much we love them, how much we want to use them, you know, and like convince them that we are worthy of using their platform. Sort of like they all have platform features. They have their feature set, they have the remit, but always requires us to come talk with them. Like I can tell you, like past 2 months, oh goodness, like I can't tell you how many engagement meetings I had with different platform teams just to say, I want to use your thing and let me use it, please. And it's just not platforms. There's other enablement teams. We can go through all the other teams within Atlassian. It could be a security, it can be SRE, it can be everywhere else, right? It's the same story. Here's my simple equation. It's effort plus time equals exhaustion, right? And I had a long list on here in the slide earlier. It's a lot of emotion that went into that. It was exhaustion, then like realization, which led to like sadness and then anger and despair, right? Despair coming when you realize that some things aren't where you need them to be in order for you to launch on a specific date that someone had set for you as a goal. But I lament, it's that sometimes it's required. Like a lot of times these are honestly immature platform offerings. Like they're not there yet. I know they're not. We spend a lot of effort trying to understand where they are, how we can leverage what they have currently, and understand where we can be in like 6 months, a year from now, if we adopt them, right? Anytime in that time frame. We spent a lot of time like working with teams to say, oh, let's spike things out, or we'll even tribute some engineers to help bring across your offering so we can actually utilize it, right? It's happened a number of places. These engagements sometimes take a lot longer than others. Some teams are a lot more willing to work with us than others because actually another slide I'll talk about that, but priorities. It's always about priorities, right? Another thing kind of goes back to the other point is lifecycle maturity of these offerings. It's not always clear what stage a platform offering is in terms of maturity. Is it at beta stage? Is it at like GA? Is it somewhere between those two or before that, like pre-alpha, right? Sometimes to get a sense, like some teams are quite honest about where they are. Other teams are not always. And I just wish there was a language that we would sort of standardize on within platform and Atlassian on communicating what we offer and and how ready we are for onboarding. And this is true within documentation. Like I would find that oftentimes people talk about things in the future tense when they actually, even though they're written in past tense. It's quite funny. Like we offer X or we do this, and we learned that they meant no in like a future milestone, which is discerning because that gives other people a false impression, not just like the engineering team, but like product managers, right? Like product managers are not always technical. I would argue many of them aren't. And they will oftentimes read these things and assume that things are a certain level, right? But they're not. I just prefer that we are a lot clearer in terms of communication. Developer experience is a sign of maturity, which I put that in there today because I was thinking back on the developer experience tidbits that were discussed today, and I would say yes, that's just completely true. Because like, in order for a product team to onboard or something, or any service team, right? You need to make sure the development experience is there so it enables them to move faster and not have to figure out how to build around your product, right? Again, that's a sign of maturity. It's not a problem. A lot of our platforms are not mature yet. All right. Oh, this is interesting. Self-service. Self-service is a sign of maturity, I believe. I had a little bit of discussion with some people outside of this about self-service. I believe the model should be, give me a user guide to explain how your product works, what it does, your product offering. Give me a document which tells me how to use it. API docs, which are just the references for your APIs, and just get out of my way, honestly. Like we have a team of engineers who can figure things out if you tell them, if you provide documentation for it. Sometimes you can get away with like maybe API docs even, right? But with some additional help. Additional bonuses, and there are examples, tutorials, and some proven use cases for your offering. So sometimes we found that I guess with the proven use cases, it's kind of interesting. Like I've seen like Confluence adopt, what is it? The time series database. Forget it.
Druid.
What is it?
Druid.
Druid, right. I can't believe I forgot about that. Druid, right? Like they adopted Druid. I'm like, that's great. They've proven it for their use case. I don't know if it works for my use cases, right? If this is a product platform offering, I would like to know what, like you say it's going to be running at tier 1 or tier 0. I truly, honestly would like to know what use cases you've proven that for and are going to guarantee it works for, right? The SLO story side of that, right? Add SLOs to your service, tell me how to use it, let me go on to do it, right? A lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times it was, we go into engagement, we're basically have to do some code changes or expect them to do code changes, get some alignment on scheduling and so forth. It is a time sink. And that goes to this next topic, which is misalignment. In some cases, there are platforms initiatives that don't appear to be aligned on the same goals. I put FI here. FI is a most recent thing that was kind of irking at me. I talked to Sydney about this the other week. Manifold intent is to define, of course, the what do you call it? The unified data model for Atlassian, right? It's supposed to say this is a concept of what a comment is or issue is across the board. But that kind of doesn't, in my mind currently, I don't see how we bridge like comments across different products or even labels. Like Confluence has labels with a text. Jira has labels with a text. Trello has labels with text and color, right? Like it's different. It's a different thing. How do you bridge that? I don't know. But the big thing that kind of bothered me more recently was PGS being part of the FI initiative, or at least I think it is because it's called FI Graph Store, provides a set of functionality. That set of functionality does not mesh with our GraphQL standards that's published as part of the AGG docs, namely pagination, right? That's been throwing our engineers for a loop for like a week now. Like, oh, we're using a Fi Graph Store, and we have to publish things using GraphQL. And how do we bridge that? Do we like have to engineer some special solution to bridge that, right? Like, it's a difficult thing. Like, it just causes a lot of toil on their side. Provisioning is another story. It really is the CCP plus hands side. Like, TLT is misalignment with our goals, and that's partially because of them not having sufficient cycles to be able to deliver on all the priorities that are given to them, right? But CCP and hands. So I want to tie that to the sites versus orgs, but I'm gonna keep that separated. The problem here is I truly just want to care about capabilities provided by platform, right? Tell me how we be able to add a product in to allow customers to onboard to that product and so forth. I truly don't care if it's CCP or HAMS, right? And that kind of led through in discussions with Commerce, in which they weren't, in some cases, sure if it should be in CCP or HAMS. I really don't think that's the right position for any platform to be in. It should be, here's the gold standard for us going forward until it's the true replacements in, until something's truly replacing it. Don't tell me to go like try to use CCP or try to bridge the gap between CCP and TLT, right? Or anything like that. And that also goes back to the sites versus orgs. We spent weeks within Compass debating, are we going to be site-based or org-based? I mean, it took weeks for us to finally realize orgs doesn't make sense because you don't have all the functionality, because things within identity and across products offerings or platform offerings are not truly compatible with the org model, right? Why is it even offered? When we came to ask like, go do provisioning and commerce, they're like, oh, are you going to be site or org? Like, why are you asking me? Like, is it really an option? It wasn't an option, honestly. Like, I know like Trello went through the org model, I believe, or Bitbucket. They were a special case, right? They're not a new product. New products, I think, have different needs, right? They don't. I was going to say they don't have much baggage. Like every other product has no baggage. Coming as a new product, you really kind of just need a golden path defined, right? And misalignment. Like this is my favorite down here. Everyone kept telling me to ship it right, leverage platform as much as possible. Then when I tell them platform's not ready, they said make contingencies, then finally hack it. All right, fine. We'll just get it working. It's not quite that direction, but it's almost like that. All right, ducks. The ducks. We had an initiative in Atlassian to ask teams to start producing docs in DAC. The problem with that is there's no information architecture within DAC to help us to discover the documentation that we need or what platforms we need to use in order to perform something. It's pretty much, if you just go on DAC right now, open it up, it's just a hodgepodge of things. You just don't know what you need to leverage. And I would say, again, that was counterproductive, right? And we found that actually most useful docs are still on Hello, honestly. Like, if you want to know how a offering works or what it's meant to do and what its roadmaps are, that's in Hello. Ideally, the information should be, most of that information would be in DAC. Ideally, DAC would, have the information organized in a way which allows new products to be able to ship, right? Meaning, you need this capability, here's your solution. We have some of that in a couple of places like the engineering handbook, and I believe there's another page that CLT had released some time ago, or maybe Cat did it. And again, I think the second point appears. Engineers are poor writers. Like they can write things, they can explain things, but they often miss the point in their documentation. I've learned this over the years. Some of the teams I work with have learned this over time, in which it's hard for them to step out of the shoes of themselves to think about it in the perspective of the consumer. we just kind of need a little bit more support around that. Like that's what I go up to, where the problem is the expectations without support. There needs to be a lot more support within DAC for DAC to have it to be better organized, to provide support to the engineers, to organizing content, to have standards around how content is for a particular subject matter to be organized, right?
Hey, Chris, I just want to do a 1 minute time check.
Oh, great. All right. Read the slide real quick, everyone. There you go. Funding is truly needed. In order for us to, we need to add heads. We need to provide self-service. We need to move things from being provisioned offerings to managed offerings in order for products not to be struggling to get out the door, right? Documentation uplift and improved support model. Not a model where we require engagement, but something that along the lines of support or shield, even solutions. Compass could potentially help with that. With some of this, like discovery is one of the things it's designed to help with discovery of components and teams, discovery of capabilities, eventually. All right. So who should build new products? I should build new products, not y'all, because I know the problems. Y'all can't deal with it. It's difficult. However, Compass is learning, documenting, and clearing the way for new products. So you can build new products too. All right. That's it. Thank you. Bye.
All right, any clarifying questions? All right,
Chris,
I appreciate it.
Chris, thanks for being honest and direct and showing your frustration. Right? That's actually visceral feeling is important for people to realize.
That was awesome, Chris.
And there I came in expecting no slides.
Well, Robbie told me I didn't have to. Then he direct messaged me, said he's going to create them. So I felt obligated then.
All right, let's give folks a 10-minute break because everybody's been going really hard at not only presenting, but also reviewing content. So we'll come back at just about 3:40 Pacific time, and then we'll have 15 minutes of Q&A. If you haven't already done so, go upvote. There's been a lot of questions that have been answered, but hopefully we want to make sure we have a conversation as part of this session as well around some of those top rated questions. Okay. Thanks, everyone. See you in 10. All right. Hopefully folks are starting to come back from the break, and we'll start to answer some of the questions here. So I'll share my screen. All right, so first question, Sunny, there's clearly a lot of room for improvement. Can we replicate success? Do you have any examples of platform component adoption that have gone swimmingly well?
Hello. I've answered all of the questions all the way to the bottom in case we don't get to all of them. But for this one like a long time ago has been GDPR. Like considering how tricky it was, I think that the amount of touch points that we had weren't a lot. And the nicest thing about it today is that it doesn't really affect our architecture today. We don't have anything that's like overbearing and kind of sitting in place. I think talk to Jason Hinge about that. He's probably got a lot of things in terms of how he designed that. I'm looking forward to Observosaurus as well. They've had a lot of really good contact with us. We've been chatting to them, and as they're building out this, as with their platform, they're kind of bringing us in as like, not product owners, but as customers to show us and demo what they're doing. And that means that we can kind of like guide them appropriately as well. If they don't suit our needs, we can kind of tell them that, or if they do, then we tell them that as well. I think that one of the really good things that they've done is added a product manager in there to do that. Pollinator has really been great because it's huge and it's massively valuable, right? Everybody's using Pollinator to ensure their services are reliable, and you know, it's a platform piece that everyone needs, and I feel like we didn't even talk about that stuff today. So yeah, it's been amazing. So those are some examples.
Yep, thanks. All right, next question. How are Confluence looking to measure cycle time? Are you wanting timing breakdown on the phases to understand where to optimize? I think, Bhakti, there's been some conversation in Slack and other channels, but anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I think we've been talking on Slack, and I'll just follow up offline. So thank you.
Okay. Next one, any centralized front-end tooling and infra efforts tend to...
So maybe it makes sense to pick the one that do not have answers, because there are some, most of them have been answered.
Sure, I'll refresh here and see what we have. Right, there was one, are all products expected to move to switcheroo? Is it ready? I didn't hear yesterday in the discussion. I'm not hearing it from products today.
I put an answer to that in Slack as well, and there's a link to a document, so people can have a look at that.
And then I'm not sure if this one was actually answered real time, but want to understand what democratized data access means.
I think we answered that as part of the presentation for Confluence.
All right, will Compass be delivering discoverability? That was a comment yesterday.
Oh, I was typing the answer just now. Yes, it is. One of the lighter slides was Compass is going to deliver discoverability of at least components, which includes services, libraries, and applications, and things like that. A later milestone will actually cover higher level concepts like capabilities, products even potentially. But yeah, the goal is to provide a place to be able to discover what's offered within your company.
Okay, and then there was a question, how can the rest of Atlassian, for Trello, how can the rest of Atlassian learn and adapt to the third-party only approach of an API first strategy?
I don't know if there's a short answer. I think it'll probably just be part of how we talk through kind of the manifold work. I think that, yeah, it's really, I mean, it's not a super complex answer, right? Like we just went always built into the API first, had that separation. Having that, not having a separate one was because it was easier. So I'm happy to like dive into specific areas with folks offline on which worked for us, but it was more just a decision and we just went with it and stuck with it. So it just became our default development model.
Okay. And then related for Compass, third-party first disclaimer is referring to additional APIs added by Compass or a requirement for any platform component used by Compass's front-end clients and ecosystem. Chris, did you get to that one?
Oh yeah. So wait, which one was it? Oh, third-party disclaimer. Yeah. All the APIs that we develop for Compass are going to be public. They will be public, 100% public. The product itself is going to be developed against those public APIs, not private APIs in a sense. The interesting thing is that we'll actually be pushing other teams to be exposing their APIs as public, which they're not totally comfortable with right now, but they kind of will be forced to in one way or another, whether we do it or they do it, because we're trying to drive them to expose that. Things like Teams from Teamwork Platform and like the generic search APIs from the search platform, right? We're trying to get them to push those things out to be public on even the GraphQL API side. Yeah.
Okay, that was the last unanswered question. Is there any of the questions that have been answered that we think it's worthwhile? We have about 5 to 10 minutes or so to have any additional discussion or any observations from the group on the first section.
The last two questions were about public APIs first. And Chad, since Trello has been API first, you mentioned rather than knowing how you do it, how do you feel about it? Is that how you would develop a product again? Because Bitbucket is mostly API first, but we're not completely there, and I think there's some good reasons for it. But I'm curious to know what your thoughts are.
Absolutely, I love it. It really lets us like roll things out iteratively. I think the personal pain I've had on Shipits over the years of trying to work with products where it wasn't there, where it's like, I know it can do it. I see it doing it in the product and I have to like inspect element because I can't find it. It does it. I think that Butler, Yosegi, those stories of folks doing things better than us also support it. So yeah, I'm a big +1 to it. What we haven't been as good about, and I think that we'd like to be more opinionated about, is public API first as far as the documentation of even privileged things, even things people aren't allowed, just having everything by default being on the public development site. And so I think we could be even better about that within Trello as well, but to enable it even more. There's things that we do with FastPath and like these things that are like tribal knowledge and stuff on how you use the API that shouldn't be, that should be like the same information should be provided to everyone. Seb might have, Sebastian on the call might have another. But yeah,
that's a great topic. One that I think Kevin knows on the phone as well in the call, but we are writing a document on 3PF. And one of the challenges we have is how to delineate between an external third party, an internal FAR team that needs the same level of documentation and integrity and quality, uniformity, et cetera. And then when you have a near team or a local team, what does that mean from a documentation perspective and at what level and where do you publish those? So it'd be interesting to learn from you. I think we have some ideas we've been sharing around the company. But yeah, Kevin is there, so.
Yeah, Chad, I'll add you to the document. I'll chat with you offline.
Awesome.
And get your thoughts.
So I guess the question, Chad, quickly, for tools and APIs that are built within a team, let's say an inner team or even a FAR team, maybe another microservice somewhere else, do you have any controls or regulations or principles on how those APIs are, where they're published and how they're published?
We have ideals, but we haven't. It's something that we could be better about. I think the short answer is that to the differences that we wouldn't differentiate, like treat them all the same as far, especially if anyone outside of your own team is going to be using it, trying to have that same standard. As far as where that is, I don't think that we necessarily have strong opinions aside from that we should have a strong opinion, whether that's Stack or somewhere else. But there's other folks that might have stronger opinions of the Trello that I can also ping.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other topics? We have about 5 minutes, or we can move on. It's up to the group.